Hello and welcome to this series of presentations from the Grade CERQual project group. In this session, I'll be giving a brief introduction to the Grade CERQual approach. I'm Claire Glenton from the Norwegian Institute of Public Health and Cochrane, Norway, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Grade CERQual project group. The learning objective for this session is to gain a broad understanding of the Grade CERQual approach. So, why did we develop the Grade CERQual approach? Systematic reviews of qualitative research, which we also call qualitative evidence syntheses, are becoming increasingly common, and they're now being used in guideline or policy development processes. So end users need methods to assess how much confidence to place in findings from these reviews. These users are likely to make these judgments anyway, so it's helpful to provide a systematic and transparent way of doing this. Grade CERQual was developed by a group of researchers with backgrounds in qualitative research and systematic reviews, and through broad consultation with a wide group of stakeholders. We aimed to develop an approach that could be applied to typical types of qualitative evidence syntheses, was easy to use, allowed judgments to be reported transparently, and allowed these judgments to be understood by end users of our syntheses. The aim of the Grade CERQual approach is to transparently assess and describe how much confidence to place in findings from qualitative evidence syntheses. Grade CERQual is not a tool for assessing how well an individual qualitative study was conducted, assessing how well a systematic review of qualitative studies was conducted, or assessing quantitative studies of quality of care. So what do we mean by confidence in the evidence? We have defined this as the extent to which a review finding is a reasonable representation of the phenomenon of interest. So in other words, the phenomenon of interest is unlikely to be substantially different from the research finding. Grade CERQual is applied to each individual finding in a synthesis. So in the context of a qualitative evidence synthesis, we define a finding as an analytical output that describes a phenomenon or an aspect of a phenomenon. Now, findings can vary a lot in qualitative evidence synthesis, but they're typically presented as themes or categories or theories, and they can be more descriptive findings or more interpretive findings. Grade CERQual is part of the Grade working group and shares the same aim as the Grade tool that's used to assess the certainty of evidence of effectiveness. However, Grade CERQual is grounded in the principles of qualitative research. Grade CERQual covers 4 components: methodological limitations, coherence, adequacy, and relevance. We're also currently discussing a 5th component, a dissemination bias component, but this is still very much under development as we try and understand more about how dissemination or publication bias might play out for qualitative research. So currently, the Grade CERQual approach only includes 4 components. So what kinds of skills do you need to apply Grade CERQual? Well, you need the same skills that are needed to carry out a qualitative evidence synthesis. In other words, you need an understanding of systematic review methodology and an understanding of the principles of qualitative research. In the next few slides, I'm going to give a brief presentation of Grade CERQual using an example. So in this scenario, decision makers are considering offering pregnant women antenatal care in groups instead of individually. But before they make this change, they want to know whether women are likely to accept it. A qualitative evidence synthesis is carried out that explores the issue for women globally. It has a number of different findings, and one of these findings suggests that one aspect women like about these groups is that the other women offer them emotional, psychological, and practical support. But how confident are we that this finding is a reasonable representation of how women globally experience group sessions? In an ideal world, this finding would be based on a large group of studies that are all asking the same question, that are showing a clear pattern, and that are of high quality. However, you may find that some of the studies have not been done very well. This is what we refer to as methodological limitations. If you're very concerned about the methodological limitations of the underlying studies, you may choose to downgrade your confidence in the finding. You may also find that some of the studies are not answering the same question that you're asking. So you're interested in women's experiences of group antenatal care. But some of the studies may actually have focused on husbands' or health workers' perceptions of women's experiences. This is what we refer to as a concern about relevance. And if you're very concerned about the relevance of the data, you may choose to downgrade your confidence in the finding. Another situation tied to relevance is where the data is only relevant to part of the question you're asking. So you're interested in the experiences of women around the world, but the data may only represent women from some settings. For instance, most of the studies may be from North America. And again, if you have concerns about this issue, you may choose to downgrade your confidence in the finding. A third issue is tied to the fit between the data underlying the finding and the finding itself. This is what we refer to as the coherence of the finding. The finding that you develop in your synthesis may reflect all of the underlying data nicely. In that case, you're unlikely to have any concerns about coherence. However, in some cases, you may choose to emphasize some parts of the data, but pay less attention to other parts of the data when creating your finding. Now, this may lead to a simpler, clearer finding, but you want to flag that there may be some concern about the finding's coherence. In other cases, you may choose to develop a finding that is more interpretive or explanatory, and that points to patterns or theories. Again, this type of finding may be more helpful than a finding which simply reflects all of the underlying data, but you may want to flag possible concerns about coherence by downgrading your confidence. Finally, you may find that the finding is supported by data from very few studies, or that the data is so thin and superficial that it does not allow you to sufficiently explore or understand what is going on. In both of these situations, you may have concerns about the adequacy of the data, and this may also lead you to have less confidence in the finding and downgrade your finding. So for each of these 4 CERQual components, you need to identify your concerns and decide whether you have no or very minor concerns, moderate concerns, or serious concerns. And after assessing all 4 components, you then make an overall assessment. So you either have high, moderate, low, or very low confidence in the finding. So that was a brief presentation of the grade CERQual approach, and in the next slides, we'll be going into each one of these components in more depth. So I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of the rest of the grade CERQual coordinating team. So to learn more about grade CERQual and for further reading, please visit our website, join the mailing list, or join the project group. Thanks for listening.